Well, I'm going to really jump in because I have a talk that takes about 40 minutes, I hope. And so I want to hopefully have time at the end for questions and answers, So I'll give you kind of a whistle-stop tour of all the icons that I've done. But because, I know there are a few people here who know about icons, but just in case you don't, I've got a small, very small piece, and I'm embarrassed how little I say about what the icon actually is. But Donncha did a very good job in getting you started on the right track. Okay, so I'm delighted to be here at last, and my name is Colette Clarke, and I've been painting icons for 22 years. I'm a member of the Association of Iconographers Ireland, and I've been a tutor with that association for 14 years. I was first introduced to icons in All Hallows. I was studying in All Hallows, and I became captivated by them. And I wanted to know more about them. So I went off to a Benedictine monastery in Bedfordshire, and the course organizer there, Sister Esther, asked me what I was doing coming to England to learn icons, because she had gone to Ireland to learn about icons. She'd gone to Sister Paula Kirsty, who is a Glencairn Cistercian nun in Waterford. So Sister Paula, when I got home, I introduced myself to Sister Paula, and she introduced me to the Icon Association of Ireland, which is who I work with to this day. Nowadays, the association works under the guidance of Eva Vladianos, who's a Greek iconographer and restorer, and she works in both Greece and France. And the method I use is egg tempera technique, and I paint in the Greek Byzantine style, which is the method that's taught in our association. Egg tempera is a very ancient method of painting, and it is painting using a mixture of egg yolk with dry pigment. And up to the 1500s, egg tempera was the main method of panel painting. And there are many beautiful examples back to the 1st century. Even we've the Egyptian Fayum mummies portraits, they were done in egg tempera, and they still look really great today. So, but after 1500, oil painting became the favorite medium for painting on panels. So tonight, I hope to cover the contents. So tonight, I hope to cover just a very small introduction to the icon and what it is and what I mean when I'm talking about icons. And then I'm going to talk about, before I go on, this is a board here that I asked Sean DeBarra, who's a fellow iconographer and tutor. He's brought a board just showing you the whole process of painting with using egg tempera. I won't go into it because it just would take too long. But if we have time at the end, we can have some questions and answers on it. And I hope to finish up then with most of the talk will be on the icons of the Irish saints, and then we'll have just a few minutes on my thoughts on icons and prayer. So, okay, just to start with, what is an icon? The word itself comes from the Greek ikon, and we hear in Genesis that God made us in his own ikon, his own image. And again, Paul talks in Colossians about God, Christ is the image or ikon of the invisible God. So when we talk about icons, we're talking about religious icons are images with religious content, depicting either Jesus, the Mother of God, saints, angels, and biblical events. And the icon comes to us from the Eastern Orthodox churches. Church tradition tells us that Luke, the evangelist, was the first person to paint an icon, and it is believed that he painted the Virgin Mary with the child Jesus. It's called the hAodha, she who shows the way. So icons have been with us since the very beginning of the Christian church, and we find them in the catacombs in Rome, back 3rd and 4th century, frescoes still there. But unfortunately, in the 8th century, we have a period of iconoclastic controversy arose for a few reasons. But two of the reasons are, firstly, it was believed that the Christians were worshipping icons, not venerating them, worshipping them. And the Old Testament prohibition against, of course, the making of images from Exodus 20. You shall not make graven images. So, and worship is reserved for God alone. So icons were destroyed in all the countries under Byzantine rule, and iconographers were put to death. I'm glad I didn't live during those periods. So finally, the Seventh Ecumenical Council of Nicaea in 787 condemned iconoclasm, and the iconographers, and the icons were once again allowed into the Christian churches. New rules were established, and iconographers had to work within these agreed rules and regulations. And these are the same rules and regulations that we work under today. So the Eastern Church did continue to paint icons, but the Western Church fostered the new innovations and developments in art, and a different art form developed in the Western Church. So the two churches, unfortunately, eventually split in 1054. But today in the West, we are beginning to see an ever-increasing interest in icons, and more people are attracted to them and want to know about them. And I'm talking tonight about egg, temper, and wood, because that's what I do. But there are other images that are icons, and it's two-dimensional wood or ivory carvings. Statues aren't acceptable in the Orthodox Church. Tapestries, mosaics, encaustic, and of course frescoes cover the walls of the Orthodox Church. So for the last few years, I've been working for two priests, 9 years now, one in Dingle and one in Bangor. And I've produced, I think it's 15 icons for them. And they range between the 5th and the 7th century. Well, one 12th century, St. Malachy, but the rest are all between the 5th and 7th century. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about the research I do. And the first thing I do is talk to the person who's commissioned the icon, because it's really good to find out, first of all, what he's looking for. And secondly, he's often a very good source of information on the saint. And the other thing I like to do is let him know what can and can't be done in an icon, like what is appropriate and what isn't. Also at this stage, it's really nice to know where the finished icon will eventually be hung, because that will influence your design, gold, decorations, etc. Gold is used extensively in icons. It's a symbol of eternity, and it doesn't tarnish. The next thing I do is I read as much as I can, and it's brilliant. If you've got primary sources, that's great. Like in the case of St. Patrick, we have the Confessions and the Letter to Coroticus, so you can find out quite a lot about Patrick from these. And St. Columbanus, we have primary sources, but otherwise I read the lives of the saints, the hagiographies. I like to read up the period that they lived, the clothes they wore, everything I can find out about them and that period. And then there are plenty of places to find books. I mean, the public libraries, the National Library. I've had brilliant finds in the Catholic Library in Merrion Square, at the Royal Irish Academy, and of course the internet. The other thing I like to do is visit the churches, museums, and art galleries. I like visiting the churches associated with the saints. Not so much look at the statues. The statues are not really, they're not that good a quality what we have in our church. A lot of them are imported from Italy and unfortunately not the best. But what I do look at in churches is that stained glass windows. We've got really wonderful stained glass windows in Ireland, and I have used them on for both St. Patrick and St. Columkill. Stained glass windows, I look at it as quite like icons, because they're two-dimensional, and the light, flows through them as it does with the icon, or what you try to achieve on the icon. Sometimes you find good models, like for instance, my tutor Ava had done St. Brendan, and I used that for the icon of Brendan that I did. But I also visit the art galleries. The Book of Kells is wonderful, Chester Beatty Library, the Natural History Museum, because for animals, and the National Museum, of course. I do look on the net too, but I have really found the internet of not very much use. There are a lot of very poor images, and you have to sift through them all, and I suppose I just get fed up and abandon it usually. I have been very fortunate to have accumulated a lot of books myself, and we have access to other books in our association, which is great. And the last thing I do is like to visit the sites associated with the saints, like here, Tara, Slane, Kildare, Glencullen, Bangor. I mean, I could go on. Aran Islands, my most recent one, and Ballyporeen. Ballyvourney, thank you. According to John O'Donoghue in Anam Cara, the spiritual wisdom from the Celtic world, the Celtic tradition was primarily an oral tradition, and the stories, poems, and prayers lived for centuries in the memory and voice of the people. And I do believe this is true. And just to relate two incidents that happened to me when I was researching different saints. The first one was, I was in Donegal in the Heritage Centre, and I was researching St. Columkill. And I met a young teenager who had just stepped in when his mother had gone off to lunch. So he was about 15. And he was very excited when I told him I was researching Columkill. And he told me, he talked a lot about Columkill and the heron. At the time, I was thinking of doing the dove with Columkill, because Colum, of course, means dove in Irish. But in the end, I used the heron, which symbolised the forgiveness of the Irish people for Columkill's role in the Battle of Culdremna. And the other story was, I was in Glendalough, and this young mother was taking her two young sons into the lake. Now, it was April and it was quite cold. And I asked her why she was doing this. And she said, the waters are healing, as St. Kevin had suppressed the monster and driven him to the upper lake. I thought it was really lovely that she was continuing the tradition which had lived on in the local people and the local stories. So I used that too in the Kevin that I did. So when I have finished all my research, I get into the design. So the design is specific for each saint and based on the research I've just completed. Each saint to me, he is or she is an individual, and I have tried to respect that in the icon. The size and the shape of all these icons have already been determined because they were all full-length standing saints I was asked to do, surrounded by gold. And gold, as I said, is used extensively in icons. It represents the uncreated light of God, the energy of God. But there are other decisions to be made, like I'm constantly looking at Greek icons and frescoes, mosaics, and manuscripts, and I use elements from all these. The next question is he going to be young or old? So I've tended to make most of my saints old, and it really is to help resolve the problem of the tonsure. The tonsure is the shaven area at the top of a monk's head, friar tuck. Robin Hood is how you hear this round, but I don't know, you might know that the Irish saints used a different tonsure. They say shaved from ear to ear. This part of the head was shaved off. So, but the Celtic tonsure we know was still being used by the monks in Ireland up to the Council of Macedon in 625, and indeed beyond in the Synod of Whitby in 664. You hear of them still arguing about the Celtic tonsure. So to get over this issue, I've either made them bald or the heads covered. But that being said, I did depict two saints as young, and one is St. Kieran, because he died at the age of 33 and he had just come to Clonmacnoise, and so I did give him a full head of hair. And the other one is St. Kevin, because I've depicted him at an early stage of his life when he's living as a hermit. So when choosing the clothing, I generally kept it with the clothing that you see on the monks of Egypt, and except for probably Patrick, which is more Roman, because he was a Roman citizen, of course, Patrick was. And it's quite interesting, we can't go into it here, but there is a strong link between the Irish monks and the Desert Fathers, so I suppose that's where I got the idea of the clothing. And lastly, symbols. I don't include a multitude of details. I like to keep it simple, the image. hAodha stresses that the image must exude stillness to aid the person before it in prayer. So the icon is for prayer. So when choosing the symbols, I've tended to portray them with just two, maybe three at the most. And you will notice in the icons this evening that many of the Irish saints are shown with wild animals and birds, and there are many stories of close connection between the saints and the animal kingdom and their connection to the earth, which I think is very current at the moment anyway. But when I've completed the drawing, I send it to two senior tutors for comments, and then I send it to hAodha, and hAodha will give me her corrections. And when they're completed, I finally send the drawing to the person who's commissioned it. And then I begin. So the next slide is going to be, from now on, these are all the slides of the icons I've done. And what I've tried to do is put beside them the image that influenced the design that I've used, okay? So the first one is St. Patrick. I mean, there are a multitude of images out there of Patrick. Sorry. But this one I have loosely based on Margaret Clarke's watercolor painting. Margaret Clarke was married to Harry Clarke, and she was an artist in her own right and worked in the art college teaching drawing, I believe. But I liked her image of Patrick as a preacher, and that's him on Crow Park, Patrick. So I tended to use that. But the other thing I used is this stained glass window from St. Patrick's Cathedral in St. Patrick's in Dublin. And it's got a lovely strong presence of Patrick. So that's why I've used this one. So I'm just got a close up here of the scroll. I'll talk about the scroll and then I'll talk about the crozier. So the quote is from the Confessions, and it's, I, Patrick, a sinner, a most simple countryman, the least of all the faithful and most contemptible to many. The letter P is taken from the Book of Kells, and it has a bird. If I can show you. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Here is the head of a bird piercing a bunch of grapes, and there's a drop of like blood coming. So it's in reference to the Eucharist. And inside here, which you can't really see, inside here is a chrysalis of a moth, and that's the symbol of resurrection. The crozier of St. Patrick it did exist seemingly, and it was in Christchurch Cathedral up to 1538. And I suppose it was an act of iconoclasm. It was burnt during the Reformation in front of Christchurch. But it was called Bacchal Esu, and it was supposed to have been given to Patrick by Christ. But the model I've used is from St. Patrick in Ballyhonnet, Mayo, this cover of the African magazine. I saw this crozier head. So I used it because the triple knot, it's kind of an oblique reference to the shamrock. And that's why I put that one in. Okay, I'm going to move on to Bridget. So what touched me about Bridget was her kindness that she showed to everybody. She didn't discriminate, and that's why I've shown her with her large cloak covering everybody who came to her for help and for healing. And Bridget is known as Mary of the Gales. And this image is based on Mary of the Protective Veil. And you can see this is a Piero della Francesca painting of Mary with her cape extended, covering all the people who've come for her help. So that's very strongly influenced this image. Ava told me to add, you can see here on the, I can get the arrow again, sorry. You can see here the hand of God. In iconography, you don't paint God the Father because no one has seen the Father. We paint Christ because he has been seen, Jesus has been seen, but not God the Father. So you paint a semicircle with the hand of God coming out, blessing the saint that's beneath it. And what else have I to say? Yes, let's go on to the next slide. I just want to show you just some of the details I've included. The dandelion is for healing. So that's the dandelion clasp that she has in her cloak. And the edge of the mantle has an oak leaf motif, and it's got an acorn and an oak leaf on it. Of course, that's reference to Kildare, the cell of the oak grove where she set up her monastery. And the color is meant to be a brick red, and it's I had read that there was a small piece of St. Bridget's mantle in the Cathedral of Saint-Sauveur in Bruges. So I heard when I was down home visiting my mother one weekend, there was a girl there, Flamina McCann, and she was going to visit Bruges. So I asked her, will you go and have a look at this? So she did, and she came back, yes, it's brick red. So that really made me very happy. So the next one is Columkill. In Columkill, he celebrated a big celebration last year. It's 1,500 years since he was born. But as I said, I used the heron with Columkill because of his symbolizing the forgiveness of the Irish people for his part in the Battle of Cuilvimna. He holds the Bible, and the hand is covered as a mark of respect for the Holy Word. So, and the quote in the Bible is from Psalm 34, and it's what he was writing just before he died. It's they that seek the Lord shall not lack for any good. And the face is based on, this is a lovely stained glass window in Churchill in County Donegal. And I love this image of Columcille blessing his monks as he's dying. The script on the book is from the Cahach, and the Cahach is on display in the well worth seeing in the Royal Irish Academy. And I did initially think I might be able to stick in a dove somewhere in the writing, but the Cahach doesn't use any animal imagery, and I thought it was probably incorrect then really to put an animal in there when it wasn't in the original books. That's what I want to say about Columcille, I think. Oh no, there's just one other thing. When I was in Glenstall, after I'd done this icon, I saw this statue, which is lovely, a wooden statue. But just to point out one or two things, like for instance, the heron, it's quite nice that he used the heron as well. But when I first did this, Ava sent it back to me about 8 times and made me move the heron. And she said the heron shouldn't cross in front of the saint, and also that the heron shouldn't touch the inner garment of the saint. So, you know, these are the rules we adhere to, and I changed them, you know. So this is St. Brendan. And as I said, I had the image Ava had done of St. Brendan. And I've changed a few things slightly. I changed the face to suit the other ones that we're going to carry. And also I've made the figure a bit more stocky. But Brendan is holding in his hand the symbols, which is, I gave him the church, is quite like the stone buildings we see here all around Ireland. And the boat he sailed to America with. I based this on Tim Severin's description of the boat. It's a very good book to read about the Brendan voyage. And the whale, the story being that they stopped off at an island to celebrate the Eucharist, and they didn't realize they were on the back of a whale until it started to move. So then they realized that. But on the back of his whale, on the back of the whale, you've got the chalice and the bread from the Eucharist. And the hand is the hand of blessing he has. So the next one is Ciaran. And the story is Ciaran would give his homework to the fox, and the fox would bring the homework to his teacher. So that's what the fox is doing here. But I think it's interesting that, you know, when we talk about the animals, I think it's the harmony that exists between creation and the saints, and the harmony, of course, that existed in the Garden of Eden before the fall. I think it's, so you see many of the saints with wild animals, insects, birds, and it seems that the animal world recognizes the saintliness of these individuals. He holds the Clonmacnoise crozier, and this is on your right is the Clonmacnoise crozier, and you can see at the back of the crozier. Lost my pointer. Anyway, at the back of the crozier, there's a whole pile of little hounds holding the tail of the hound in front of them. So because it's broken off, as you can see there halfway up, I've continued it on the one I did of Ciaran. There was very little written about Ciaran. It was quite hard to find any information on Ciaran, but you glean the information from other saints around the same time. So I got a lot of information from Kevin. And when Ciaran died, St. Kevin visited him, and they spent all night in the church, and Kevin prayed. And as he prayed, the blessed soul of Ciaran returned to his body, and they conversed for the night. I love that story. But I mean, there was obviously a close association, because if you go to Glendalough, there is St. Kevin's Church, and right beside it is St. Ciaran's Church, you know. And there was an old pilgrim pathway, seemingly, between Glendalough and Clonmacnoise. Okay. So the next saint is Kevin. And so we have Kevin holding his hand out, and the story is the blackbird alighted, and she made a nest, and he held his hand out till the young chicks hatched. And the painting by Jack B. Yeats has painted the same image, which is a lovely painting. In his right hand, he's holding Glendalough, the tower, and St. Kevin's church. I see a really close resemblance to St. Kevin and Francis of Assisi. There's so many stories about him with animals. But anyway, at the bottom here, you can see the monster at his feet, and this is based on William Burgess' design. I was looking for just an image that I could use for a monster, and I have to say John DeBarra spotted this one, and I've used it. It's for a stained glass window it's from a stained glass window in Finbarrs in Cathedral in Cork. But you can see it's the story from Numbers, I think it is, when Moses creates the brass serpent that heals the people when they look at it. But I think it's interesting too, Kevin doesn't kill the monster. He subdues it and sends it to the upper lake. It's like evil, good conquering evil. And we come across that again in Michael. He subdues the dragon. He doesn't kill the dragon. So this is the next four I'm going to talk about are the four that are above in Bangor. And the first one is Columbanus, probably the best known one. But and here I did put the symbol of the dove in. You see in the, I can get the, no, there. You see the dove here in the letter C. So Columbanus was known as a man of letters, and he wrote in Latin and Greek. There were seemingly there's a story that somebody met these monks in Europe, and he said they were really good Latin scholars. He said, oh, they must be Irish. But so the quote is, Christi semus non nostri, let us be of Christ and not of ourselves. He also carries the sachet. You see the sachet here at his side, because the Irish monks were known to always have their book of Psalms with them, their psalters. And the other reason I've put this in is I had recently seen the Fadden Psalter. I don't know if you've seen it in the National Museum. It's a really interesting story of this Psalter cover, and the book itself is pretty damaged. But anyway, it was in a bog, a Tipperary bog. It was found in 2006. And the interesting thing about the Fadden Psalter is the inside of it, inside the leather covering, is papyrus, and papyrus could only have come from Egypt. So it means that either the Irish monks had gone over there, or there were Egyptian monks here in Ireland. I mean, there's a whole lecture there you could do on the associations between the Desert Fathers and the Irish monks. Second image I'm going to show you is that's the picture of the Fadden Psalter, and this is one from the McDurnan Gospel in the Lambert Palace Library. But you can see it's Luke, and Luke is holding a book very similar to the Fadden. You see the three buttons in his, I can't remember which hand it is. It says left hand here. Same style. This is the second Columbanus I did, Nave Columban for Kerry. He's slightly different, but he carries a crozier turned inwards, because the abbot, it's turned inwards if he's an abbot, it's turned outwards if he's been a bishop, because the abbot has just jurisdiction over his monastery, whereas the bishop has jurisdiction over a diocese. And I'm just going to put the two of them together just to show you the slight differences I've done now. And one thing to note, I've hoisted up the garments. Usually when the monks were on the move, they pulled up the garments, and you can see their ankles, but if they're in the monastery, they're let down. And I think that's all I wanted to say on those two. Sorry, the mountains behind Columban here are the Alps, because Father Eugene wanted to portray the that story in particular, where he leaves Switzerland and goes to Italy and established the monastery in Bobbio in Italy, which is still there to today. So Father Eugene said, I like the idea of a man setting off at 70 to a new adventure. So this is St. Cumgall, who's the founder of the monastery in Bangor. It was a huge monastery. They had over 4,000 men at one stage in Bangor. But there again, there's very little written about him. And I found out more about Cumgall from reading about Columbanus and Gall. But what did touch me was his humility and his hospitality. So I have him holding a basin and a jug, a basin water jug and a towel, because he washed the feet of all who came to visit him in the monastery. There's even a story of him trying to wash the feet of Columkill. He wasn't very keen, Columkill, seeing me, but anyway, he had to give in and get his feet washed by Cumgall. But I decided to base him on St. Anthony of the Desert. St. Anthony would be one of there's two, St. Pachomius and St. Anthony, the founders of monasticism in Egypt. And because of, he would be regarded as one of the early monastic settlements in Bangor. So I based him on Cumgall on Anthony. And also Anthony was known for his humility. So washing the feet, of course, is based on Christ's act of humility in the Last Supper. And you see loads, we see Pope Francis washing the feet of prisoners. And here, there's loads of images of people you wouldn't expect to be washing feet. And this is King Louis IX washing the feet of the people to come to visit. And on the right, we have St. Cuthbert washing the feet of a visitor who turns out to be an angel. And below here, this is the design I used on the basin and the jug. It's from the National Museum it's on a basin in, I think it's medieval anyway. Okay, this is Gall. So Gall is always depicted with the bear. The story is the hungry bear comes to him and he says, I give you food if you go and get me some logs for the fire. So he goes off and gets logs and he gives them some bread. So what I've painted the bear with it's a silver birch log. It was quite hard to get it so I decided to use silver birch so you could see it as a log. And he's handing him a Cuisine de France roll. I was afraid when I drew it first, people said, oh, is he giving him another log? I said, no, it's bread. So I got this idea. I thought everybody knows a Cuisine de France roll. So I gave him, and you can see the statue is the same idea here. He's actually handling bread too, and the bear is giving him the log. So there are quite a few images. I was kind of surprised how many were of bears and monks. And the most famous one is this Saint Seraphim or Sarov. He's a 19th century Russian saint, and a great story about him and the bear. And then I found these pictures on the net of modern monks playing with bears. So not that uncommon as I thought it would be. I just want to go back to show you, just talk about the crozier for a minute. The crozier Gall is holding is Columbanus's. Initially, when Columbanus decided to go to Italy, Gall says, I'm not going with you. So Columbanus was very angry and he forbade him to say mass. So at the end of his life, he sends his crozier to Gall. When Gall receives the crozier, he sets the table for mass. So I thought it was interesting, even though he disobeyed him, in the end, he did obey him. So very human, I think. And just one other thing that happened when I was doing this, Ava, I had drawn the grasp on the crozier very tight. And Ava said, no, loosen it, Colette, loosen it. There's no tension with the saint. There's no tension in heaven. I like that idea. So I did soften the grasp. And I think it is important that the design that I do is acceptable to the Orthodox tradition. They did preserve it, so I like to try and make sure that I'm adhering to the rules that they set down. So the next one is, is Malachy. This is the last of the four for Bangor. And in Malachy, as I said, one of the latest ones that I did, he's 11th century, was born in the 11th century, died in the 12th century. So here you see the mitres on the ground, Bishop Mitre. He refused to take up the role of bishop twice. And I got the idea from the El Greco of St. Bernard of Clairvaux. He refused 3 times. I don't think he ever actually became a bishop. I can't remember. But so that's where I got the idea of doing it that way. And the crozier he's holding is from the Rock of Cashel. It was found in Rock of Cashel. And I felt it was okay to use this because Cormac McCarthy was a close friend of Malachy. And anybody who's visited the Rock of Cashel, there's a beautiful church there, Romanesque, Cormac's Chapel. So I felt it was appropriate to use it on Malachy. So that's the the Rock of Cashel crozier there. And this is the one I painted for Malachy. You can see the St. Michael subduing the dragon. And at the handrest, there's all intertwined dragons, which is on the original, but you can't see it so well in the metal. And the last thing is the quote. So the quote is from John 20, and peace be with you, which is the quote chosen by Father God. I think it was a really appropriate quote for a man that was not only a monk, a priest, a papal legate, a bishop, church reformer, but he was also a mediator and a peacemaker. So the P and the J are from the Book of Kells. And that's just, they stand in Bangor with the icons in situ. As you can see, it's quite a dark stand, so that's why I used a lot of gold in it. And the central image is Christ enthroned. So the last 3, I think we have left, 4, sorry, are, the first one here is Ha'odha. And hAodha, once again, there wasn't a lot written about hAodha, but she's an interesting character. And she's called Woman Nave Éireann, the foster mother of the Irish saints. And her most famous foster child was St. Brendan. So when I was thinking about doing this, I did a few drawings, and I had, because there were quite a few saints she fostered, but I had them drawn at the bottom. And I don't know, it was Ant or somebody said to me, but it's like a creche. This isn't going to work, I thought. But I was researching in the Catholic library, and I was going home. I thought I'd go in and read a bit more about her. So I went it started raining, I went into the National Art Gallery. And while I was in there, I always go into the Harry Clarke window there. And when I was in there, I'd never noticed this one before, Nave Ha'odha. I just turned around and there it was. So I thought, oh, that's exactly what I need to do. And it's just because I recognized immediately it was Brendan because he was holding the boat. So I thought, I can do it that way then. So the way I've done it is more like Ha'odha is presenting him to the world. And so like a presentation you see of the Virgin or our Lord. I think that's what the hand of God once again is up here blessing Ha'odha in her work. So this is St. Michael of Skellig that Father Eugene wanted. And I didn't use, normally you would see Michael with a sword, but I purposely didn't use a sword because I had just visited Skellig Michael when I was researching it. And it was shortly after the Star Wars movie had come out, and there were at least half the people there were there with lightsabers. I thought it would be mistaken for a lightsaber if I give him one of those. So I decided I'd give him the shield because he is known as the protector of the island. And of course, there was an old stone shield that was part of the rounds of Mount Skellig when you visited there as a pilgrim. So unfortunately now it's fallen into the sea with erosion. But behind him are the steps up to the beehive huts, and he's holding in his left hand the beehive huts and protecting them. Behind him is Skellig Beag in the sea, but the clothes he's wearing are from the Byzantine royal courts they're based on, but it's because he's a saint, he's an angel, and he's in the heavenly courts, so we're portraying him coming from the heavenly courts. There is an inscription at the bottom of this, but I took this photograph before I put it on, and it's Keitoi Gosulok Day, who is in the likeness of God. And I just wrote it in the very bottom on the gold. And the face I used is one Ava recommended me to use. It's from St. Michael from the Byzantine Museum in Greece, but it did originally come from Core Museum as well. So I did my best to paint him something like this angel. It's a beautiful angel of Michael. So this is the last one of Enda. And I've shown Enda on Aaron Moore, where he founded a very large monastery. Aaron was known as Aaron of the Saints. And the image is based on Saint Pachomius, who you see on the other side, another father of monasticism from Egypt. The angel is bringing him the cloak of authority and the book which he has on him. And the story goes that the monks were praying to see who will be the next abbot. And they saw the angel bringing this to Enda, so they knew he was the man for the job. So on the left side, I have St. Benet's Church, which is a church at the very top of the hill, overlooking Enda's old monastic settlement. Very bleak spot, but seemingly was a place where the monks went, retreated for further prayer and penance. And down below, I have a holy well just on the way down, because there are a few actually on the way up to St. Benet's. But I just show you, these are the monks in the cells praying, and it's based on the Dormition of Saint Saba, or that's Saint Saba, but it could be Saint Ephrem, the same. And you see the monks in their cells. In these, you can actually see they've got icons on the wall. I didn't paint those on my labels, but I think it's great. So I'm just going to finish up. I hope I haven't gone on too long. On thoughts on prayers and icons. And I'm putting up an image. It's an image that a lot of us in the association would have worked at. It's based on the icon that I did of Meath, but it's just a close-up of the head. And I just thought it'd be nice for you to have an icon to look at when I'm talking about it. So I suppose in Ireland, we're used to seeing religious imagery. I mean, in our homes and churches, we do have plenty of images, but an icon is different. In Orthodox Christianity, icons are used extensively in the liturgy, and Orthodox homes will always have a prayer corner crammed full of icons. The icon is not for decorative purposes, but it is a powerful presence wherever it's displayed. We can't make an icon without prayer, and the prayer that goes into making an icon comes out from it. Both the physical and the spiritual world are represented in icons. The brightest highlights are to be found where the garments touch the body of the saint, as light emanates from their bodies. The face color moves from a dark earth color to the brightest final white lines, showing us how the light of Christ transforms us. The saint's eyes are open and they hold our gaze. There are no white reflections in the iris of the eye, which you see in photographs, because icons don't reflect light, they are light. So when you can come before an icon, the saint silently watches and listens to your prayer, constantly inviting you into relationship with God and his saints. The mouth is painted softly shut, not tightly shut, as he listens and will respond if required to do so. The ears are usually shown, letting us know that the saint is listening to both our prayers and open to the interior voice of the Lord. The forehead is rather convex and usually quite high, and this expresses both the power and the wisdom of the Holy Spirit. There is no excessive emotion shown in icons. It invites us into silent waiting before the Lord. So when you come before the icon, you keep your eyes open and behold the saint before you. You can say prayers, light candles, or just remain in silence, watching and waiting. One thing these saints have taught me is ceaseless prayer. They lived in prayer and communion with God. They saw God in everything, in nature and people, and every situation was brought to God. I think it's interesting when you're reading the Brendan Voyage, it feels like the monk never left the monastery. They keep the hours of the divine office on the high seas and all the islands they stop off on. Doing an icon is never easy, and I'm afraid each new icon is as difficult as the one you've just finished. It's always starting all over again. But I know God guides and the saint helps. And even though sometimes you hit a wall, prayer will get you over it, under it, or through it somehow. Since I've begun studying these saints and depicting them in icons, I've realized that yes, we are a small island at the edge of Europe, but what an island. I'm very proud of the faithful, fearless saints we have produced, and I pray we will produce as many in our times and in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing which struck me, I haven't been in any Orthodox church in Ireland, but I mentioned already that I spent a week in Greece, and we saw the inside of a monastery and also then of some Orthodox churches. And it's very striking, the emphasis on the icon. I mean, we of course have sacred art in our churches, etc. But the emphasis seems to be greater in the East. And I wonder, is there a different relationship, so to speak, between, you know, the Eastern Christians and their icons and our use, if you like, of sacred art and prayer, etc. I mean, I wonder also whether the great development of the icon in the East has to do with, there was this outbreak of iconoclasm, isn't that right? People actually didn't want images.
Yeah.
They tried to destroy them, etc. And was it partly a reaction to that which led to huge development?
I think the icon is, the Orthodox Christians are very always stressing incarnation, you know, that God became matter, you know. So I think that's what the icon does very strongly. It really emphasizes that, you know, God became man, you know, and that's something I think, you know, because that's even when you're painting this, like that's an earth color you start with. So it's like Adam, you know, and the new Adam is Christ, and that's the light coming out of it. So all and this process here, it's like, I mean, you can go through the whole process of making the icon. This is the wood, and the lines on it that you cross is the marching body of Christ. The cloth is regarded as the muslin that he's wrapped in, the shroud that he's wrapped in. So the ivory is at the sepulchre that he's laid in. So you've got all these, you know, constant reminders of all the of Christ and what he did. You know, and I think that's what's brilliant about icons, is that you're constantly reminded. But I think you're right. Just go back to the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells is, that would be regarded as really good icons. You know, the Orthodox would be very happy with the book. Like Romanesque art too, like they would be very happy with that because it's symbolic art.
Yes.
I mean, modern art is closer to icons than Renaissance art, you know, because it's symbolic as well. You know.
So I'm sure you've said already, Colette, that you're willing to answer questions.
Yeah,
So,
anybody?
people want to make any other comments, they're welcome.
So can I just ask, I always thought icons were these pictures, the other ones that you only see the face.
Yeah.
That's what I always thought an icon was. And then
No, like there, as I said, they can be biblical events. They're, you know, scenes. I mean, there's some. I love. There's one that I saw in Greece one time, and all the saints of the year, like only about that size, but there's just hundreds of saints in it, and it's amazing. You know. To go back to the Orthodox Church, I think what's lovely about going into an Orthodox church is that, you know, all the saints, like these that I have done, the standing saints are usually symbolic of the community of saints standing with them. When you go into the nave of the church, where mostly the congregation stand, they're usually about shoulder length. And there is a real sense that the saints are praying with you, you know, and I think you get that in the Orthodox church generally. You know, they're not as quiet, they're quite chatty when they go in, but I like the way they're more tactile. They touch the icon, they kiss it, and it's like they're meeting family or greeting family. So they're very alive, the saints in their lives. And I think sometimes we've made them, you know, too distant. We can't touch that, you know, it's a work of art, you know. But it isn't like that with the Orthodox, you know, and they all have the right. I mean, you see them, you know, they come to you and they give you a card with an icon on it, and they'll show you the one they carry around with them, you know. So I like that idea.
Right, how would you go about painting, say, a contemporary saint, you know, that maybe was the New York Stock Exchange or something like that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is different, an interesting story, because recently one of our tutors was doing Oscar Romero, and Ava, she was working under Ava, and she had put glasses on him, right, because he wears glasses. So Ava looked and she said, "What is he doing with glasses on?" And she said, "Wore glasses. Are they a symbol of him?" And she said, "No, I don't know." And she said, "But wore glasses. I don't think you need glasses in heaven." So in the end, I think Sister Rosalie, put them in his hand. She wanted the glasses, but so there's things like that. It's quite interesting because it's good to have an Orthodox person who will give us feedback on things like that. But yeah, you do, what you do is you paint it in the style. The garments are very stylized, like 1, 2, 3, the highlights, and so that you do the same technique with modern ones. I don't think I've done a modern one. My niece is here, Trace, you've got Trace in this year, Tata has, yeah. That's the most modern I've done. Yeah.
Where would you start? I'm trying to do one for Dara, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
Things like Dara.
Oh, yeah.
There's you've got some information, specific any of it. So just do what you said, visit Karna and
yeah. You find out everything you can, yeah. And as I said, it is really helpful for everything. You'd be surprised that just like, for instance, the other story I remember now is from the Aran Islands. Like, we'd spent a few days in the Aran Islands, walked the feet off ourselves, but I was disappointed. I didn't find, like anything to help how I was going to do Enda. And just the last day, there's a shop there which looked like, what do you call those shops? Like cows or that, you buy leprechauns and whatever. But I thought, oh my God, it's raining. I go in here. So I walked in, I was just wandering around, and I asked your man then, I said to him, "Oh, I could have killed myself. I didn't go in sooner." But he gave me a book which was really helpful, and he also guided me to a few other things, So, the way it's, I just think that's the way God works, but it is amazing. And you only find that by, I think you've got to put yourself out there and don't, I suppose one of the problems I had when I started doing icons, first of all, was that often you see the Irish saints, you see 6 in an icon style, the 6 exactly the same, in very dull brown garb and all the exact same, usually with the Roman tonsure. The real thing about the Roman tonsure we use in Irish, especially because they had to fight so hard to hold on to their own, But anyway, I just think that wasn't really fair to the saints, because they're all individuals like us. We're all individuals, and we'll all hopefully be saints some days. But it's like, I think you have to respect that. Like, God made us different. He didn't make us all the same. He didn't suddenly say, "Right, I'm going to churn out 100 Irish saints." Or you go and be like them, But when you read the stories, I know a lot of these are fantasy stories, but it does usually give you a little bit of idea of what the individual is like, Like even that story of Conbanus, I felt sorry for him being left, I was thinking, he's gone off on his own. He wants Gaul to go with him, and he's so angry so human, and yet Gaul, I thought he was so lovely. He was Spanish from saying mass, and he respected that. So I think those, even though there might be all truth, there's some little truth there that tells you a bit about the individual, And I think if you don't respect that and go and look for that, I think you're not doing the saint any justice, Hopefully that's
And those pictures you show that they're so full of information, and beautiful, but if you don't know, just look at this picture, and yet there's something.
Yeah, and I could spend all night for one. I went a bit to town and just been talking to but I don't know why. Maybe it was because the first woman I was asked to do, and being a woman, I thought I'd have to sort of respect this, and I thought I might be the only woman I do, but I did get carried away with it.
Very Bridget, I think Ava told you all those little people. She said, everyone their name.
When I drew it, when I drew it, first of all, I put these, because I was thinking of putting people on. I was like, oh, if you're the king, I'll put a king in, or she can, so fine. So I put them in, and when Ava saw it, she said, who are these people under a cloak? I said, oh. She said, they all have to be named. They all have to be named. She said, oh, 21 under. So I had to go back to the stories and find and take some of them out because I had no name, but I found somebody for them all, and I put just the mission. So I have each of them named. If anybody wants to know them, I have it in my notes. But so that's it. They're the sort of detail that I love. I mean, I am, as you can see, a bit obsessive. But it's
Anybody else
yeah. Maybe I would have put in less if I known I had to name them all.
But I suppose you could say that the simplest style suits very well incorporating stories.
Yes, yes. I mean, often you find that Donncha is a historian, so when you're looking for facts, when I read those two books, I find I can't get any meat into what I'm going to do. I'm left kind of dry.
And there is, isn't there? I mean, or at least I was speaking for myself. An image, for instance, of St. Patrick is so established.
Yeah.
So the bishop in green, and there was an attempt, wasn't there, by a sculptor some years ago here in Tara, in fact, to represent St. Patrick as a young slave, and people didn't like it. So certain images become established.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I mean I agonized over this, but I suppose the other way our St. Patrick's Day has become such. I mean, everything goes around with mitres and crozier, and I just thought I can't do this, I just because I know that's what they're going to see, and like because I'm working this time in this year I live, and I thought maybe it's time to try and because I saw what Colette Clarke had done, I thought, oh, that's a lovely image, I thought, of Patrick. So I thought, well, maybe I went too far back, but it doesn't come out in the picture, but it is actually green. It comes out, it's a greenish blue rather than a bluish blue, but unfortunately in reproduction it looks more blue. But that was my one. And the other thing I can say to you about the shamrock was only introduced in the 17th century. The first time we see an image of Patrick with the shamrock is from the St. Patrick's halfpennies or farthings. It's the first time we see on a copper coin at the back, Patrick holding the shamrock. So it's a very new introduction into the theology of Patrick. So,
but it's actually the case, though, I think, in his confession, he has a creed. So he did lay emphasis, obviously, in his teaching on the Trinity. So it's not surprising. But of course, it's true that the shamrock, that's somebody thought that of much later after the time of St. Patrick as being a good representation of the Trinity.
I mean, in the deer cry and that, like he's very, very Trinitarian, like he's where,
And what's written on St. Patrick's School, that was from the
confession, the first line from the confessions,
I came very fresh. I always have the idea as well that when you're writing an icon, that you're also praying when you're doing it. So are there particular prayers or is it?
I brought one along in case anybody else. There's just one. I thought it'd be nice. I was going to start and I forgot to start with the prayer. It's the icon prayer, and it's Sister Paula Kirsty that gave me this prayer, and we use it all the time in our association. Like before, when we sit down to pray, we start by saying, O Lord our God, send down the grace of your Holy Spirit upon this icon. Bless it and make it holy. Grant to it the power and strength of miraculous deeds. Make it a spring of recovery and healing. We always say that prayer. You pray constantly. I mean, you pray when things are going bad. You think, oh God, please. It's usually my gilding out there. And the way you hit the wall and you think, oh, why am I doing this? All those negative stuff come up. And then you just think, okay, it's time to, just go back to, and that constantly go back to what you're doing. And okay, the saint, this is, I want to represent you as best I can. So you've got this dialogue going on all the time. And when things go well, then of course you're praising, thank you God, and thank you the saints. And you know, and so it's, you know, yeah, it's like I would say constant prayer, you know, and it's nearly normal, you know. I don't know how you do it without. I mean, often I do have people come to me saying, I want to learn about iconography. And I'm not interested in religion. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know about it. And I thought, I don't know why you want to do icons. There's nothing else that they do. But, you know, and they're all about teaching church truth. You know, that's what it's for, you know. I mean, I think what they're probably saying, they want to learn how to do tempera painting, you know, but not painting icons, you know. But you know, sometimes I take these people on, I think, okay, well, you know, this is what we do, but this is the way we do it. And maybe that's the way God is working through them, you know, I don't know. But, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much again, Colette. Actually, this is just by the way, but last night there was a shot on one of the youth programs talking about Ukraine, etc. And it was of I think, a parliamentarian in Moscow. And obviously it had Philip maybe the office, whatever, and there were two little icons on his bookshelf.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, Colette.